Hello Internet, and welcome to episode 2 of Skill Check, where today we'll be talking about Minecraft. I had posted about my series on a couple of the subreddits, and I had gotten a lot of good feedback, and hopefully you'll see it put to use this episode. Also, one of the occurring themes throughout the comments I had gotten was to explain more about Minecraft, because apparently nobody had ever thought to use Minecraft as a game board. So that's what I'll be doing today. We're going to go over different parts of Minecraft and how I use it, like where to begin when you first get into your world, how you represent enemies and players, how distance is calculated, something that I had actually thought of and I thought it was a really good idea, and so do my players. They're player model traps, is what I call them. Traps for the actual players in-game instead of just, you walk into a trap. We'll also talk about the usefulness of command blocks and physical puzzles for your players to solve in-game. So we'll start off in why I use Minecraft. I decided to use Minecraft when just a few sessions into my very first game I started playing with this group. We were trying to play online over Skype. We live in various parts of Canada, so we of course can't get together. And while I was trying to explain the situation at hand, the other players were getting confused, so I started drawing maps and whatnot using MS Paint. How crude. And that just wasn't working. So we tried everything, and one day I was like, what about Minecraft? And it just stuck. So that is why. Then it was all about trying to figure out how to use Minecraft. When we first started, it was, excuse my language, it was a clusterfuck. Like, we were so lost. One of the players had originally put up a server for us to use. He hosted it off of his own computer. This isn't a Minecraft tutorial, so you'll have to figure out how to host your own Minecraft server if you plan on using this method. Anyway, so he decided to make a Minecraft world, and he decided to do a super flat world so that we could literally create everything. In Minecraft, a super flat world is just grass blocks on the floor. There are no trees, there's no hills, there's no water, there's no nothing. It's just a massive green plains. And it did work. A couple of the players spent hours and hours building the world I had described for them in the sessions prior to this. And so it did work. We used it for a while until that group fell apart. And then we decided to start a new session where when we got in, instead of using a super flat, and this is exactly what I suggest to you, use a standard terrain map. This will give you your hills, it will give you pre-made villages on which you can expand. It gives you water and underwater. If you use creative mode, then you can make all your dungeons underwater if you have an underwater campaign. It also gives you dungeons and a place called the Nether, which is pretty much hell. So if you have any extra planar stories or campaigns, that's useful for that as well. So, what we did when we first got in, well, what I did rather, because I decided to make this one all on my own, because for the most part, the entire story and everything was a surprise. My players had no clue what was happening. So when I first got in, I knew I needed some sort of starting base. Where are my players going to begin? In my campaign, my players began in a mass grave. They were like half dead, trying to survive, fighting for their life right at the beginning of the story. Put them in going thinking on their feet. They have to figure out how to get out of this grave, how to do this, how to do that. So that's what I did. I built a mass grave, I built some roads, I used some just wooden plank blocks, if any of you are familiar with Minecraft and know the different types of blocks. I used wooden planks to represent barrels and crates, which the players rummaged through in the very beginning. So it's all about build what your players are going to start with. And as I went, some of you may be more into the planning. You may have a lot of things planned way beforehand. I like to get a rough outline of my story and build it as I go, depending on the aspirations of my PCs. So I try to keeping along with the general storyline, of course. So after the initial grave building, I built a little village in which they call home, I guess, their home base, and from that I just built things throughout the weeks as sessions went on. Now, to show where enemies are and where your players are became kind of a problem in the beginning, because using regular blocks and whatnot could get confusing really quickly. So in a recent update in Minecraft, it gave trophy models, which are little models of heads. So there's a skeleton head, there's a wither skeleton head, there is a creeper head, a zombie head, and a Steve head. And I generally use those as markers for enemies. This way my characters, when they can physically see in-game those markers up ahead on the road or whatever, then, that's when they start getting their butts in gear and start planning for what to do for the encounter, whether it is to run away or whatever. Unless the enemy is a large type monster or huge, then I'll use colored wool and I'll build it up accordingly to the what the books say. I have a rules lawyer in my group, so I let him figure all that stuff out. I think a large monster is 2 blocks wide, 2 blocks long, and 2 blocks high, or 3 blocks high. And each block that we use in Minecraft as a measuring tool is similar to a regular Gameboard. It's 1 square is 5 feet. That goes for up and down as well, so when people are climbing buildings and such. But, so we use the heads as the enemy tiles, and in the beginning we were using wool blocks for player characters. They would each choose their own color. Whatever color they chose at the very beginning of the campaign was the color that they were to be throughout the entire campaign. This way, it's easy for me to plan things. It's easy for me to just look at the screen and say, oh, this is so-and-so, and, enemy A is moving here. So, we started using colored blocks, but with the introduction in another update of carpets, we started using them, colored carpets. The carpets sit right on the floor tile, right on the bottom. This way they don't take up a 5-foot tall block of space. It allows for easier sightline while in-game, especially when you're building dungeons. It's easier to see past each other, see up ahead, and plan your routes and whatnot accordingly. Speaking of dungeons, actually, I started doing these things I call player model traps. And usually in standard pen and paper, what you would do is you would have a trap somewhere, but then your player's passive perception, you would roll against it to see if they find out the trap is there. And if not, then they would have to roll reflex or whatever. Well, the way I started doing traps was building tripwires in dungeons, or using pressure plates that are kind of camouflaged into the floors. So if it's a wood floor, I'd use a wooden pressure plate and whatnot. Or in dungeons, I would use tripwires. And when my player characters are counting their spaces, they pick up their carpets, and then their character model, looking at the floor, counts out his blocks. Well, if they don't see these, I use that as their passive perception, their physical player perception. If they walk straight into a tripwire, that's their own fault. They walk right into a trap. So I would set up a tripwire or a pressure plate or some sort of thing to set off a redstone signal. I'm sorry for people who have never touched Minecraft before. I physically just don't have the time to sit and explain an entire game to you. But I assume that if you're listening to this and you're interested in this and you've made it this far, then you at least know something about Minecraft. Sorry, I digress. When they're looking down at the ground and they physically set off those redstone signals, I hook it up to a lamp, so that a lamp somewhere in their direct line of sight. This way, when they step on it, they see this, bright light, and everyone knows the moment you see that light, everyone sighs, and it's like, oh, well, time to roll a skill check or a reflex check. And it makes the game a lot more fun. It makes the players more into the game. Like, they actually have to look for something. And it also helps, speaking of looking for things, it's a good segue into hiding things, secret rooms, secret doors, stuff like that. It's the same thing. Instead of using a passive perception or whatever to notice that, the rock here is crumbling or whatever, I physically represent that by having a dungeon, maybe built out of stone bricks, and then a couple walls or a couple blocks are cobblestone. Sorry. A couple bricks are cobblestone. This way it actually looks like they're gonna crumble, and, maybe there's something behind there. And it's up to the players to, search that area, or, do a strength check, or, do whatever they want to do to see if something is behind that. And if not, no harm, no foul. And it just adds another aspect into the game. It helps with RPing. It really gets the players into the game, into the world that their characters are in, and following the story that they're meant to follow. Another good point with using Minecraft is the introduction of command blocks. It seems like a lot of things have just recently been introduced to Minecraft. This would have been really difficult for someone playing a while ago before any of these carpets and whatnot. Anyways, command blocks are really useful for teleporting the entire party to a specific location on the map in which you've built something, some sort of structure, maybe a dungeon, or maybe you want to teleport them to whatever. I know in my game, I sometimes, if we're short on time, I allow my party to fast travel, quote unquote, and they just turn on creative mode, jump up in the air, and fly back to where they're supposed to go, simply just to move the story along. But command blocks really help that, because you can just set up a block somewhere when your party's going to be here. Say they have to go to this town and rescue someone. So they get there, they do all their things, and at the end, once they've defeated everyone, you've put a command block with a little button on it. And when you right-click a command block, you can type in a command, of course. And one of the commands selects all the players on the server and teleports them to a specific location according to the coordinates that you've typed in. So at the end of a quest or whatever, it's really helpful to set up that, and if you have nothing planned for their journey back home, or they simply don't want to walk that far, it's a good option to have that, click this button and now you're back. It saves time, then you can move on with the story, you can move on with more interesting things than a long ass journey that nobody wants to do. And it also helps for things like for story components. Like in my very first session, for the players to get into their characters and get into learning how to play, because we did have a couple of new players, it's good to teleport, use the command blocks to teleport them to, like I said before, dungeons. In my first session, one of the NPCs asked the group what their first dungeon crawl was, how they went. I read this on Reddit. I'm sorry to whoever suggested that on Reddit. I definitely stole your idea, and it was a very good success. If you're listening right now, thank you very much, and I can't remember your name, but if you are listening, post it. Anyways, the NPC asked the players what their first dungeon crawl was, and they went... I had them all press a button, or I pressed a button, and it teleported us, way across the world to a dungeon I had created. And I had them go through the dungeon and, tell me what they did, and what kind of monsters they fought. And at the end, this was a really funny thing, and it really made the players' day. I went throughout the week leading up to the session, I approached each player and I said, whatever their specific situation was. Like for the new players, I was like, hey, you know what? You should go through the monster manual and pick anything you want as the final boss. And then don't even tell me, but when I say it at the very end, shout it out, and everybody will be so surprised that I let you pick the boss. And, for the more veteran players, I was like, hey, you've been playing for so much longer than I have. What's a good boss monster? And I said, what? Tell me at the very end, and it'll help me do this, and whatever. And so at the very end, they get to the final boss, and I say, all right, and what was the boss? Like I said it in the NPC's voice, and everybody shouted out a different answer, and then there was just silence for a few seconds, and one of them was like, what? I thought you asked me, and everyone was like so confused. And then back in the NPC's character, I was like, so you guys don't remember what you fought? You guys must have really been hit hard in the head or something. And everybody was laughing, and finally the group had decided on what they were fighting, and so we fought it. And laughter and things like that, making them work together, it's a good thing to bring everyone together and into a group to finalize the party. Lastly, Minecraft is also really good for physical puzzles. Similar to what I had talked about earlier with the player perception, being able to see the traps physically and the secret rooms and all that, I also had them do puzzles, like actually do them. There was one where they couldn't get past the door until they put in a certain number of colored rods in a proper pattern in a door full, or in a wall full of like holes for these rods. And I had used colored wool as the rods. And earlier in this dungeon, quote-unquote dungeon, was underneath a house. And so one of them, after 10 minutes of trying to figure this puzzle out, one of them went all the way back up, and they looked inside the house, and the pattern was the carpet inside the house. And so he's like, oh, and they put in the proper colored rods, and it opened the door. But that's just one example of what's possible. You could have so many different types of puzzles to make your characters actually go through. And it's definitely, once again, just a way to immerse your characters that much further into this fantasy life. So I hope that was helpful. To recap everything, we talked about how to begin when you start a Minecraft world. So build your first starting zone for your characters, and just build it as your story progresses. Use heads as your enemy tiles for combat, and carpets for your players. Carpets allow you to see and maneuver the battlefield a little bit better than a full block would. Remember that each block is 5 feet by 5 feet, so whatever way you move around, it's just like if you were using a tile on an actual tabletop. And don't forget to use Minecraft literally instead of just as a representation for things. So use it for, puzzles and traps. And don't forget command blocks, because as small as it is to teleport somebody somewhere, it makes things so much easier. If you need to build a big dungeon, fly for 5-10 minutes somewhere, build your dungeon, write down the coordinates, and teleport everyone there. At the end of the dungeon, have another command block that teleports everyone back to, where they began, or where, whatever. So, once again, I hope this was informative, and if you like it, give it a like, share, all those cool things, and I will see you next time. Take it easy.